You pick it up without thinking. You don't even know why. One second you're eating, reading, or lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and the next second, the phone is in your hand. You didn't decide to pick it up. It just happened. And here's what's strange. There's nothing new on it. You checked it 4 minutes ago. You know that. Your brain knows that. And yet the pull was so strong you couldn't resist it. What is going on inside you? The answer is not that you're addicted. That word gets used a lot, but it misses something deeper. What's actually happening inside your brain when you reach for that phone is something far older than the internet, far older than language. It is a survival mechanism that kept your ancestors alive on the African savanna, and it is now being used against you with mathematical precision. To understand it, you need to go back, way back. Not to the 90s, not to the invention of the printing press. You need to go back roughly 2 million years to the moment your species became what it is. Your early ancestors lived in a world of radical uncertainty. Every rustling in the tall grass was either wind or a predator. Every berry was either food or poison. Every face in the tribe was either an ally or a threat. The ancient environment did not send you notifications. It sent you signals, partial, ambiguous, incomplete signals, and your survival depended entirely on your ability to scan for them constantly. The brain that evolved to handle that world did not evolve to be calm. It evolved to be hungry. Specifically, it evolved to crave information the way a thirsty animal craves water. Not because information felt good, but because information was the difference between living and dying. Neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp spent decades mapping the emotional architecture of the mammalian brain. He identified a system he called the seeking system, a dedicated neural circuit that floods your brain with dopamine, not when you find something, but when you are looking for something. The hunt itself is the reward. The anticipation is the drug. The moment you pick up your phone, that ancient circuit fires, and it fires hard. This is the first thing the engineers who built your apps understood. They did not have to invent a new kind of pleasure. They just had to tap into the oldest one. Now think about what a social media feed actually is. It is not a list. It is not an article. It is a scroll, infinite, unpredictable, unending. There is no bottom. There is no finish line. Every swipe might reveal something fascinating, something funny, something that makes you feel seen, something that makes you feel outraged. You don't know what's coming next. That's not a bug. That is the entire product. B.F. Skinner figured this out in the 1950s, decades before the first smartphone existed. Working with pigeons, Skinner discovered something that would eventually reshape the architecture of modern technology. When a pigeon pressed a lever and received a food pellet every single time, it pressed the lever steadily, then stopped when it wasn't hungry. Predictable reward produced predictable behavior. But when the pellet came randomly, sometimes after one press, sometimes after 50, something different happened. The pigeon became obsessive. It kept pressing and pressing and pressing. It could not stop. Skinner called this a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, and he noted with clinical precision that it produced the highest and most persistent rate of response of any reinforcement pattern he had ever tested. Your phone is a Skinner box. That is not a metaphor. That is an engineering decision. The likes come sometimes. The replies come sometimes. The interesting video appears sometimes. The outrage-inducing post appears sometimes. You never know when. And because you never know when, your seeking system never switches off. It just keeps pressing the lever. Psychologist Larry Rosen, who has spent 30 years studying technology and the human mind, found that the average person checks their phone every 15 to 30 minutes, not because something happened, but because the brain has been trained to expect that something might have happened. The check itself becomes the habit loop. The phone doesn't even have to reward you anymore. The possibility of reward is enough. This is where it gets stranger. Your brain doesn't distinguish between social threats and physical ones. When you post something and wait for a response, the neural systems that activate are the same systems that activated when your ancestor waited to see whether the stranger at the edge of camp was going to attack. Social uncertainty and physical danger use overlapping neural circuits. The stress hormone cortisol rises, your attention narrows. Your body enters a low-level alert state. You feel it as anxious anticipation, a low buzz you can't quite name, something that makes it very hard to read a book or sit quietly, something that only seems to resolve when you pick up the phone and check. And when you do check, when you find a reply, a like, a mention, a small wave of relief washes through your body. Not joy, relief. The relief of a nervous system that was scanning for a threat and temporarily concluded the coast was clear. Relief that lasts, on average, about 4 minutes, and then the scan begins again. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, testified before the U.S. Senate in 2019 that the attention economy is not a passive system. It is an adversarial system. The engineers on the other side of your screen are not neutral. They have more PhDs in behavioral psychology than any hospital. They have unlimited A/B testing capability. They run hundreds of experiments per day on hundreds of millions of users simultaneously. Every color, every sound, every micro animation, every placement of a button has been tested and refined to maximize the probability that your seeking system fires and your hand reaches for the device. You are not fighting your phone. You are fighting 2 million years of evolution that was purpose-built to make you scan, combined with the most sophisticated behavioral engineering operation in human history. The odds are not in your favor. But here is what's genuinely interesting about this. The same mechanism that makes you compulsively check your notifications also made your ancestors extraordinary. The seeking system is not a flaw. It is the engine of every act of curiosity your species has ever committed. The researcher who couldn't stop thinking about a question. The artist who had to finish the painting. The child who needed to know what was inside the box. The explorer who sailed toward an unmapped coastline, not because it was rational, but because not knowing was physically unbearable. The drive that built civilization is the same drive that makes you pick up your phone before you've even opened your eyes in the morning. It was never designed for restraint. It was designed for relentless pursuit. The question is not whether to turn it off. You can't. The question is what you point it at. Some of the most focused people alive do not have less seeking drive than you. They have pointed it somewhere the algorithm cannot follow. At a problem with no end. At a craft that can never be fully mastered. At a relationship that keeps revealing new depths. The system fires just as powerfully, but it fires for them, not for the engineers, in a building in Silicon Valley who have never met you. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge, who spent his career distinguishing between wanting and liking in the brain, found something important. The seeking system and the pleasure system are separate. Wanting and enjoying use different circuits. You can want something intensely and feel almost nothing when you get it. Sound familiar? You checked the phone, nothing was there. You checked it again, still nothing, and yet you couldn't stop. Berridge's research suggests the modern attention economy is almost perfectly designed to maximize wanting while minimizing satisfaction. Every scroll produces more wanting. Almost nothing produces lasting satisfaction. The result is a brain in a state of chronic low-level craving, never hungry enough to notice, never full enough to stop. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not weak-willed. You are a precision instrument that evolved for a world that no longer exists, running in an environment built specifically to exploit that mismatch. That's not an excuse, but it is a diagnosis. Because once you see the mechanism clearly, something shifts. The next time you pick up that phone without knowing why, you have a moment, just a moment, where you can see the ancient circuit firing. You can feel the seeking system light up. You can recognize the ghost of your ancestor crouched in the tall grass, scanning the horizon for motion. And you can ask yourself, is there something in front of me right now worth more than a notification? Something that your searching, hungry, 2 million-year-old brain could actually sink its teeth into? Something that won't dissolve in 4 minutes? Tonight, when you pick up your phone without knowing why, and you will, remember what just happened inside you. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't a lack of discipline. It was one of the oldest systems in your brain, doing exactly what it was designed to do. The real question isn't why your phone keeps calling for your attention. The question is whether you want to keep giving it away. Because every time you unlock your screen, you're spending something you'll never get back: your attention and your time.